My daughter-in-law stood there in her spotless white gown, her eyes burning with anger, and her voice cut through the music like a knife. "Get out, old woman. This isn't your family." The whole room froze. Around 200 guests turned their heads to look at me. My own son stayed quiet, didn't defend me, didn't say a word. So, I lifted my chin, kept calm, and walked out. Not because I was broken, but because she had no idea, wasn't walking away in defeat. I was walking away to end her fairy tale. And an hour later, when those doors burst open and 9 men in black suits marched in, each one of them claiming to be her husband, the screaming you heard wasn't mine anymore. Before I share everything, let me quickly say thank you for being here. Drop a comment, let me know where you're watching from, and how your day's going. My name is Evelyn Carter, and if someone had told me I'd walk out of my own son's wedding in silence after being told I wasn't family, I would have laughed in their face, but that's exactly what happened. It all started the moment I walked into the wedding hall. Something felt off. Not the flowers, not the music, but the way Camille, my soon-to-be daughter-in-law, looked at me. There was no warmth, no kindness, just pure annoyance, like I had shown up uninvited. I brushed it off because that's what mothers do, we bite our tongue to keep the peace. I smoothed down my lavender dress, the one I'd struggled to find after returning to others because she suddenly changed the color scheme at the last minute. I forced a smile, telling myself this was Danny's day, my baby boy, the boy I raised alone after his father walked out when he was just 10. I wanted this day to be perfect for him. Walking into that grand hall, I still hoped maybe this wedding would bring Danny and me closer again. Maybe we'd laugh like we used to, or share little moments like when he sat on the kitchen counter eating cookies I baked after long shifts at work. But the second Camille opened her mouth, I knew better. "Evelyn," she said. Her voice was sugary sweet, loud enough for the guests nearby to hear, but when her eyes locked on mine, they were cold. "You made it." As if she hadn't sent me 20 text reminders about the schedule. I smiled back anyway, wouldn't miss it for the world. She looked me up and down slowly, her lips curling. "Oh, Lavender. Well, that's cute. Cute. Like I was a child who'd made a messy drawing and wanted praise." I swallowed the sting and forced out a thank you. Then the wedding planner swooped in. Valencia, tall, sharp, clipboard in hand, rattling off schedules and photo times. But my eyes caught something that made my stomach drop: the seating chart. 10 tables, 10 seats each, and one long head table. I scanned for my name. Table 8, way in the back, near the kitchen doors. I blinked, thinking surely it was a mistake. "Valencia," I whispered, "I think something's wrong. I'm the groom's mother." She gave me a polite smile that didn't touch her eyes. "No mistake. Camille thought you'd be more comfortable with the older guests." Before I could say a word, Camille chimed in. "It's just easier for the servers, Evelyn. Logistics, you know." My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to flip that chart over, but instead, I smiled through clenched teeth. "Of course, it's your day." Inside though, something inside me was breaking. The ceremony itself was beautiful, or at least that's what people kept saying. Flowers, music, the arch by the lake. I only half heard it all, sitting in my back row chair, gripping the hem of my dress so my hands wouldn't shake. When Danny walked down the aisle, my chest swelled with pride, the same way it did when he graduated college or landed his first job. He looked so handsome, so grown. I waved, hoping for a glance, a smile, something. But he didn't wave back. He just kept walking, focused, like I wasn't even there, like I was part of the wallpaper. I told myself it was nerves. Moms always make excuses. After the vows, the kiss, the cheers, came the reception. Table 8. I sat with strangers, distant relatives, and an old man who wouldn't stop talking about golf. Every time I looked at the head table, I felt smaller, like I wasn't Danny's mother at all, like I was just a +1 who slipped in unnoticed. When the photographer called for family photos, I stood, smoothed my dress, and waited. Surely, they'd call me over. I sat there and watched my son pose for photos with Camille, her mom, her stepdad, and her cousins. The wedding planner kept waving more people into the pictures, never once glancing my way. My chest felt heavy, and I told myself not to cry, not to cause a scene. Somehow, I made it through dinner. But not a single speech mentioned me, not a word about the money I'd spent, the hours I worked, or the sacrifices I made. I kept thinking, just hold on until the cake. You can handle this. But then Camille came over. She had a glass of champagne in her hand and a fake smile plastered on her face. "There you are," she said sweetly, but her tone was sharp underneath. "Why are you hiding back here? People are starting to notice." I blinked at her. "I'm not hiding. I'm just sitting where you told me to." Her smile twitched. "Don't get defensive, Evelyn. This is my day. I can't have you sitting in the corner making people uncomfortable." I felt my face burn, but before I could answer, she leaned close, her breath hot in my ear. "If you can't be happy for us, just leave." I pulled back, shocked. "Leave? Camille, what are you?" "You heard me," she hissed, her eyes cutting right through me. "You're ruining the mood. This isn't your family anymore. It's mine, so go." Her words hit me harder than I expected, harder than anything in years. I looked over her shoulder at Danny, my son. He was laughing with his friends, completely unaware. Or maybe he just didn't care. "Camille," I whispered, my voice shaking, "this is my son's wedding." She straightened and snapped her fake smile back on as a few guests turned to watch. "Exactly. His wedding, not yours." Then louder, so everyone could hear. "You know what? If you can't behave, you should leave." Every head turned. The room went silent. Phones came out because people love watching someone else's humiliation. My blood went cold. For a second, I thought Danny would step in, say something, stand by me. But he didn't. He just stared at the floor. That silence from him that hurt more than her words. The planner appeared at my side, speaking softly but firmly. "Ma'am, maybe it's best if I didn't let her finish." I stood, straightened my dress, and said, loud enough for Camille to hear, "Enjoy your night." Then I walked out, past the stairs, past the whispers, past the chandeliers that suddenly felt foreign. The security guard held the doors open, and the night air hit my face like a slap. But my hands were steady. My heart, too. In that moment, I decided something important. Camille thought she had humiliated me, that she had won, but she had no idea. I wasn't walking away broken. I was walking away ready. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Quiet means waiting for the right moment to strike. I got into my car and sat there gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. But it wasn't from sadness. That had died back in the ballroom when my son chose the floor over me. What I felt now was different, cold, sharp, focused. I was done being quiet. I started the car and drove home. Not a single tear. Once inside, I kicked off my shoes, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out my laptop. The wedding check, the one that could have fixed my roof and covered my medical bills for 2 years, was still in my purse, tied with a pretty silver ribbon. I pulled it out, stared at it, and laughed. A hollow, bitter laugh I barely recognized as my own. She said I wasn't family. She had no idea how wrong she was. I know what family means. I know loyalty. And I know lies when I see them. And Camille Hartman. She was nothing but a walking lie. I'd suspected it for a while. Little things never added up, like the day she was in my kitchen making coffee, giggling on the phone. She thought I was out, but I heard her whisper, "Don't worry, baby, I'll be done with this soon." When I walked in, she jumped and claimed it was her cousin. I let it slide then, convincing myself I was overthinking. Danny was happy, and that's all I wanted. But deep down, something didn't sit right. Then there was the day I stopped by her apartment with a gift before she and Danny moved in together. While she was out, her phone lit up on the counter. A name popped up, Brad. The preview read, "Miss you, wife, wife." My stomach twisted, and right then, I knew something was very, very wrong. I didn't confront her back then either, because Danny had already put down the deposit for the venue, and I didn't want to risk destroying everything if I was wrong. But I wasn't wrong. Not even close. That night, after seeing Camille's real face at the wedding, I opened a folder on my computer I had named, just in case. Inside were screenshots, saved texts, and photos I'd been gathering for months. I hadn't collected them to ruin her at the time. I collected them because, deep down, I was afraid this exact moment might come. And if it did, I wanted to be ready. The texts were bad enough, flirty messages to men with names like Travis and Nolan. But the worst were the wedding photos. Not my son's wedding, hers. Different dresses, different men, different dates. At first I thought maybe they were old pictures or something staged. But the timestamps told the truth. One was from last year. Another was from just 7 months ago. And honestly, who owns that many bridal gowns, unless they're collecting husbands like trophies? My stomach turned, and I felt sick for Danny. He wasn't marrying a woman in love. He was marrying a predator, a professional scammer. That's when I called Marcus. Marcus Green, my neighbor's nephew, worked as a private investigator. Months ago, when my doubts about Camille wouldn't leave me alone, I reached out to him quietly. I didn't want to believe my suspicions, but I needed answers. Marcus didn't sugarcoat anything. After 3 weeks, he handed me a file so thick it looked like a phone book. Inside were 9 marriage certificates, all legal, all with Camille's face, except sometimes she wasn't Camille. Sometimes she went by Amanda, or Crystal, or Lauren. Same woman, different names, same con. The pattern was clear. Meet a man, marry him fast, take everything he has, and disappear. 9 men, in 5 years, and Danny was about to become number 10. Marcus even tracked some of the ex's bonds down. They were broke, bitter, and angry, but above all, they felt stupid. Some had pressed charges, but she was clever. She picked men in different states, used fake papers, and always moved quickly enough to stay just out of reach. Nobody had ever pieced it all together until now. When Marcus showed me everything 2 months ago, I wanted to run straight to Danny. God knows I wanted to, but then I remembered the last time I brought up Camille, how Danny looked at me like I was just jealous, like I was trying to ruin his happiness. If I told him the truth, he wouldn't have believed me. He would have chosen her, just like he did tonight when he let me walk out of his wedding alone. So I kept my mouth shut. But while Danny planned a wedding, I planned something else. I started calling those men, one by one, introducing myself and explaining what Camille had done. Some hung up on me right away. Others broke down crying. Most didn't want to get involved until I showed them the proof Marcus had collected. When they saw her face in my screenshots, every single one of them believed me. And hurt people can be dangerous. Camille had left behind a lot of hurt. Brad Stone was the angriest. She conned him out of $80,000 with a fake business scheme. Victor Ross was calmer, but cold. He was a lawyer, and he told me flat out he'd help me bring her down. Luis Ramirez broke my heart because he still loved her, even after she drained his savings and walked out of his life. In the end, all 9 men agreed to stand with me. 9 men with nothing left to lose. 9 men ready to take down the woman who destroyed them. I spent weeks planning every detail, flights booked, hotel rooms arranged, every piece of evidence printed and organized. I didn't want chaos. I wanted precision. I didn't want Camille screaming and lying her way out of this. I wanted her trapped, surrounded by truth, with no escape. So I gave the men one instruction: wait until I call. And tonight, when I walked out of that ballroom humiliated, I made that call. When they answered, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power, not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that builds slowly and then knocks everything down in one clean sweep. Camille thought she erased me from my own son's life. She thought she humiliated me, but she has no idea. In less than an hour, she'll learn what happens when you push a woman who's done swallowing her pride. I closed my laptop, grabbed my keys, and glanced at my phone. 9 messages lit up the screen. We're ready. My hand tightened around the phone, and for the first time all night, I smiled. If Camille wanted a fairy tale wedding, I'd give her one. Just not the kind she dreamed of. I slid my phone into my purse, walked calmly back to my car, and felt something strange: peace. That's what happens when you finally decide enough is enough. I started the engine and drove back toward the venue, my mind sharp as glass, running through the plan one last time. The 9 men were already close by, waiting for my signal. I told them to wear suits because this wasn't going to be some screaming match in a dark parking lot. No, this was going to be clean, sharp, and right. In front of everyone Camille wanted to impress. As I pulled up the long driveway, expensive cars lined both sides. Through the windows, I could see the reception lights glowing and hear the muffled thump of music. The party rolled on without me, like I had never mattered. That was about to change. I parked off to the side and dialed Marcus, the pie. He answered on the first ring. We're good, he said firmly. They're all here. I let out a slow breath, not from nerves, but because this was the moment when months of planning finally became real. Give me 10 minutes, I told him, then hung up. In the rearview mirror, I smoothed my dress and added fresh lipstick. If people were going to stare on, I knew they would die. Wanted them to see strength, not shame. Then I stepped out and walked toward the doors. The moment I pushed them open, sound swallowed me. Music pounded, Glasses clinked, laughter roared. People danced, people cheered the celebration of my son's new life. The kind of night I once dreamed of, standing proud as the mother of the groom. But that wasn't my role anymore. Tonight, I was something else. I spotted Camille instantly at the head table, laughing with her head thrown back, her hand clinging to Danny's arm, like nothing had happened an hour ago, like she hadn't cut me to pieces with her words. Watching her, I almost laughed. Did she actually believe she was untouchable? Not anymore. I walked straight down the center aisle between the tables. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Whispers began. Nobody expected me back. Camille noticed too. Her smile flickered, confusion flashing into irritation. Then just for a second she covered it fast with that fake grin and called out loudly, "Evelyn, you're back. Everything, okay," like she hadn't told me to leave like garbage. I didn't answer. I walked to the DJ's stand, picked up the microphone, and faced the crowd. My hands didn't shake. My voice was clear. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, calm as stone. "I know I'm not on the schedule for speeches, but I think it's time you know exactly who you're celebrating tonight." The music faded. Every head turned. Camille froze, the color draining from her cheeks. Danny stood slowly, confusion written all over his face. "Mom, what are you doing?" I ignored him. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about her. "You all know her as Camille Hartman," I said, locking eyes with her. "But that's just one of her names. 9 other men know her by 9 other names. Isn't that right, sweetheart?" Then I tilted my head toward the doors and gave the signal. The double doors swung open, and in walked 9 men in dark suits. Side by side, like a tidal wave of truth crashing through Camille's perfect fantasy. The room fell silent. Heels clicked against marble. Gasps cut through the air. And of course, phones came out instantly. People live for this kind of drama. The first man, Brad Stone, stepped forward holding a framed wedding photo. His voice was sharp, bitter. "Hi, Camille, or should I say Amanda? That's what you called yourself when you married me." The crowd murmured. Camille's eyes widened. Her hands flew to her mouth. Another voice followed, stronger, angrier. "Victor Ross, or should I say Crystal? That's the name you used when you married me 2 years ago. Do you still remember those vows?" The whispers grew louder. Camille's face went pale. "What is this?" she screeched, her voice cracking. She turned desperately to Danny. "Danny, tell them to leave. They're lying." Danny's face was ghost white, his voice trembling with rage. "Camille, what the hell is this?" I didn't stop. I gestured toward the line of men fanning out across the hall. "These men aren't lying. They're your husbands. Every single one of them." The room erupted in shocked gasps. Guests whispered, some too stunned to hide it. Phones were raised high, recording every second. Luis Ramirez stepped forward, his hands shaking as he held up a stack of bank statements. His voice was soft but raw. "You drained my savings. You told me you needed the money for a medical emergency. I almost lost my house because of you." Another man slammed a folder down on the head table. Papers scattered, marriage licenses, receipts, photographs. His voice cut like a knife. "She's a scam artist. 9 husbands in 5 years. And now," he pointed straight at Danny. "Number 10. The cameras flashed. People gasped. And Camille, for the first time all night, had nothing to say. Camille was shaking so badly her teeth almost chattered. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water, but no words came out. Then, all at once, she snapped. "They're lying," she screamed, her voice so high-pitched a few guests winced. "All of them. They're obsessed with me. They're crazy." She clung to Danny's arm like it was her lifeline. "Baby, you know me. You know I'd never." But Danny pulled his arm away as if her touch burned him. His voice was low, shaky. "Is it true?" Camille stammered, eyes darting around the room, desperate for an escape. "Of course not. This is a setup. Evelyn did this. She's jealous. She never wanted us together." That was my cue. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the floor like a judge's gavel, sealing her fate. I leaned into the mic, my voice steady but sharp. "Jealous? You think I'd go this far out of jealousy? No, Camille. I did this to save my son from becoming your next victim." I pulled a thick envelope from my bag and tossed it on the table in front of her. "That's the report from my investigator. Every marriage license, every fake name, every crime. And just so you know," I paused, The authorities already have a copy. As if on cue, faint sirens wailed outside. The guests gasped. The room erupted in chaos. Some pulled out their phones to record up close. Others backed away like Camille might infect them. Her face twisted into something wild: anger, desperation, pure hatred. She grabbed a champagne glass and smashed it against the floor. "You ruined my life," she shrieked, lunging at me. But before she got close, 2 police officers stormed through the doors, hands on their belts. "Camille Hartman," one of them boomed. "You're under arrest for fraud and bigamy." Gasps rippled across the room. The officers moved toward her. Camille kicked and fought, screaming so loud it echoed off the walls. "You can't do this, Danny. Help me, help me." But Danny just stood there, frozen, watching the woman he thought he loved get cuffed in front of everyone. The officers dragged her out, her wedding gown scraping across the floor like a dirty rag. Guests whispered, some laughed, others just shook their heads. Phones stayed raised, capturing every second of her downfall. I stood still, silent, my heart steady, not because I felt nothing, because I felt everything all at once: relief, rage, sorrow, justice. When the doors slammed shut behind her, I set the microphone down and finally looked at my son. Danny was pale, his whole world shattered. He opened his mouth like he wanted to speak, but no words came. I didn't go to him right away. He needed to sit in the wreckage for a moment. He needed to understand this wasn't MIT, was her. He stayed seated, eyes locked on the empty spot where Camille had stood. Like if he stared long enough, he could erase the last 10 minutes. The room buzzed with whispers and phones, but I barely noticed. All I saw was my son. I walked toward him slowly, not for drama, but to show him I wasn't afraid anymore. When I reached the table, he finally looked up at me. Something broke in his eyes. His voice was raw. "Why? Why didn't you tell me before the wedding?" For a second, I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I had played this conversation in my head 1,000 times. And never once had I imagined that question. I thought he'd scream, accuse me, call me a liar like he did when I warned him months ago, but now, he just looked broken. I set my purse down, folded my hands, and met his eyes. "Would you have listened, Danny? If I told you she wasn't who she said she was, would you have believed me? Or would you have stood there, letting her humiliate me in front of everyone like you did tonight?" He flinched like I'd slapped him, but I wasn't holding back anymore. Not tonight. He buried his face in his hands, leaning back in his chair, like the weight of the world had finally crushed him. I thought you didn't like her because she wasn't what you wanted from me," he whispered. "I thought you were just being controlling." Those words cut deeper than I expected. My chest tightened. I repeated, steady but sharp, "Controlling. Danny, I raised you alone after your father left. I worked double shifts so you could go to college," I told him, my voice steady, "so you could build a life better than mine. Do you really think, after all that, I'd try to ruin your happiness just to feel in control?" Danny shook his head, his eyes red, his voice breaking. "I didn't think she was like this. God, Mom, I didn't know. I wanted to grab him, pull him into my arms the way I used to when he fell on the playground and scraped his knee. But I didn't. Not yet. He needed to feel this pain. He needed to see what happens when you ignore the people who love you and trust the ones who only want to use you." Around us, the reception was falling apart. Guests slipped out, throwing me uneasy glances, some pretending not to see me at all. The DJ had shut down the music, and the planner was whispering nervously to the staff. The once perfect head table was a mess: shattered glass, scattered papers, the ruins of a fairy tale. I bent down, picked up the thick envelope I'd tossed earlier, and slid it toward Adani. "Everything you need to know is in there," I said. "Her names, her marriages, the men she conned. You were about to be number 10. His hands shook as he opened it. With every page, every license, every photo, the color drained from his face until he finally slammed it shut like it burned him. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I loved her." Those 3 words almost broke me, because, as much as I wanted to hate him for ignoring me, he was still my son, and now he was just a man whose whole world had collapsed in front of 200 people. "I know," I said softly, "and that's what she counted on. That's what women like her do. They look for men with soft hearts and big wallets. You're a good man, Danny. You always have been, but good men, they're easy targets." Tears welled in his eyes. For a second, I thought he might fall apart completely. But then his jaw tightened, and he wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to pull himself together. What happens now? He asked. I sat across from him. Now she goes to jail, and you start picking up the pieces. First thing in the morning, call your bank, freeze every account she touched. Then, talk to a lawyer, protect yourself. He nodded slowly, then looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years, real vulnerability. And you? He asked quietly. Where do you go after this? That question hit me like a punch. He didn't even know the answer anymore. I reached for my purse, stood up, and said the only truth I had. Home, Danny. The same place I've always been. I started to walk away, but he grabbed my hand. I turned, and saw tears rolling down his cheeks. I'm sorry, he choked out. For everything. For not listening. For letting her. His words broke, and I squeezed his hand. Not because it fixed anything, but because it was all I could give him in that moment. We'll talk later, I said gently. Right now, you need to take care of yourself. And then I walked out. Not because I didn't care, but because if I stayed, I might never leave. By the time I reached my car, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Dozens of texts, unknown numbers, probably reporters, bloggers, people who caught wind of the scandal. Social media was already blowing up with it. Hashtags, memes, screenshots of Camille being dragged out in cuffs with her tiara crooked and her makeup smeared. Someone had even posted a clip of me on the mic, calling out her 9 husbands. The caption read, "Mother-in-law for president." I laughed out loud in the car, because of course the internet would turn my nightmare into a spectacle. But I hadn't done it for them. I did it for me, for my son. For every time, I bit my tongue and swallowed my pride so he could have the life I never did. I drove home, in silence, parked in my driveway, and just sat there, breathing. Not because I felt guilty I didn't, but because I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace, the kind that comes when you know you've done the right thing, even if it meant breaking everything apart to do it. Inside, I kicked off my heels and headed straight for the kitchen. My lavender dress was wrinkled and stained, the jewelry dull and smudged. I didn't care. I set my phone on the counter, opened the cabinet, and pulled down a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. Well, this counted. I poured a glass, sat at the table, and let the quiet wrap around me. Not the heavy, lonely quiet I'd lived with for years, but the earned kind. The kind that whispers, you survived, you won. That's today's story. If it touched you, leave a like and subscribe. And don't forget, share your own life lesson in the comments below.